Welcome back. The result that I want to achieve in this video is going to be that we have this little border around our buttons once we click on them. And this is going to require quite some effort because we also need to reset the old buttons or the other buttons that we had selected before that. Okay, so in order to get to this point, we of course also need to create this appearance for each button. So we need to set the style for the button that we clicked on. And therefore, let's go ahead and create a new file. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this file, or I'm going to create a new, but it will really learn from this file, or it will be pretty much the same. So let's create a new drawable. And let me call this one selected option border background. So BG. Okay. And we can click OK here. And now let's go to our default options border. Let's copy that and now go over to the selected options border and really just replace this. The only thing that I will need to change here is going to be the color that I'm using. And the color that I want to use for the stroke will be the color primary. So the default color primary. So it will be this purple color. And you see, well, you barely see it here, but there is this purple border that is now surrounding our entire screen. If I make it 5 density pixels, you could probably see it better, or even 25 density pixels. Now you see that we have this purple border now. Okay, but I just want it to be 1 density pixel, so it's going to be super thin. The rest stays pretty much the same. So we just have this shape, which is rectangular. We have this stroke, which is this fine line that surrounds it, and we have this solid color which makes the background white, as well as this little radius which makes the corners rounded. All right, so that's our selected options border BG or background, and I want to be able to set it based on what we clicked on. So in order to make things clickable, I will need to add something to our app compat activity, and that will be that we add an on-click listener here. Like so. So view on click listener. And you see I separated this. So our quiz questions activity is still inheriting from app compat activity, but it's also implementing the view on click listener. So now it's going to allow us to click on to items inside of it, and we can now implement the members. So you can see we get an error here. What we can do is we can now hover over it and implement the on click method. So you see there's this override fun on click, where we get a view and then we can do something in here. So currently there's nothing implemented yet, but we're going to change that in this video. So first of all, we have this big code where we assign the questions, where we get the current position and so forth. We will need to change that because I don't want everything to be in the onCreate method. We will need to separate it clearly. And then it will be a lot easier to read our code and understand what's up in the code and so forth. Therefore, what I will need to create are going to be a couple of private variables up here, which are going to be, for example, the current position. So I will create it outside of any method so that I can use it in all methods inside of this class. So I'm creating this global variable current position so that we get the current position, and you see we used the current position here. We're going to have to override that. And then we will need another variable, questions list. So this one will be the array list of questions. And we need to make it nullable at this point because we cannot assign it at the outside of any method. We need to assign it inside of the onCreate method. And then we can go ahead and set up the selected option position integer, because we need to know which option was selected. And by default, I'm just going to say this, the selected option was 0. And we're going to override that accordingly once we click on to any of them. So this will be position 2, this will be position 0, and so forth. So we need to know which one was selected because our questions, they have this option 1, option 2, option 3, option 4, but then the correct answer is an integer. And we need to compare whether the selected option is the same as the correct answer for us to know whether we were right with our selected answer or not. Okay, so now let's go ahead and create a method that will take care pretty much of all of this stuff here. So now we can extract it, refactor into a function, and let's give the function a name of setQuestion. Okay, so this will then say private fun setQuestion, and you see it just cut out everything from it and created this private function called setQuestion. So that's how you could do it. You could just right click the part that you want to extract and then go to refactor and function. You can also use the shortcut here, Control Alt M, and this will then create the function and at the same time call this function. Okay, so now we need to adjust this setQuestion method a little bit, or this function. So first of all, I'm not going to get the question this way here. So first of all, we will need to get the questions actually inside of the onCreate method. So that's one point where I was too quick with the cutting out. So the questions list now will be a global variable, as we saw. So we need to use this global variable that we had created up here. Okay, so we need to assign it at one point, which we now do. Okay, we assigned the mQuestions list and now we can use it throughout our project, which means we can use it in the setQuestions method, but we can also use it in other questions where we need it. So we do need it inside of the setQuestions because we need to know which question we currently are at. So we have this question, which gets it from the questions list. And let me get rid of this log stuff because we are not going to use the log entries. This was just for our testing purposes. And now because the questions list is a nullable, I need to force unwrap it here with 2 exclamation marks because I'm sure that the questions list is not going to be empty at this point. Also the current position, we need to use the mCurrent position. So our global variable and assign the value to it, even though we did already assign a value to it, we set it as 1. So we can actually get rid of this setting statement here as well, but we need to replace our current position at the other spots where we used it. Okay, so now this will pretty much do the trick and it will be fine. Now the current position has to be, now there is something that I have not assigned yet, and that is the button. Okay, so here we have the find view by ID for all of the text views and so forth, but the submit button never has been created. So let's go ahead and create a variable here, private var, and this was button submit. And this will be a button nullable. So let's import button here with Alt Enter. This will add the widget here. And now we can use this button inside of our onCreate to find it. So button submit will be found by its ID r.id.button submit, which is this submit button, of course, this one here at the bottom. Okay, so I want to change this to finish once we are at the last entry of our options. Okay, so let's go back to this questions activity. And when we set the questions, we get the questions here. We then set everything, right? We set the image, the progress bar, and so forth. But what I'm also going to do here is I'm going to set the button based on the current position to either display submit or finish. Okay, so we can just go ahead and say here, if the mCurrent position is equal the questions list dot size, and here I need to use the double exclamation mark because it's a nullable. So if that's the case, if we are at the last entry of our questions, because we have 9 questions, right, in our particular case. So if we are at the last question, I want to set the text of our button submit. So because it's a nullable, I need to add the question mark here. Button submit, or how did I call it? I call it button submit, like so. Dot text to be equal to finish. And otherwise, I want to set the text to be next or submit. Okay, and now what I want to do is once we click onto any of the views, I want to set all the views that weren't selected to be gray and or have this default border, this gray border, and the one that is selected to be purple. So I'm going to create this new method that I'm going to call default options view. So a function to set the default options view when the new position is loaded or when the answer is reselected. So it's going to reset basically the colors of the selected answers, and then we can just set it to be gray. So private fun default options view. Okay, so this method will take care of that, and therefore I need to know the options that I have, and I get those by having the array list of text views. Okay, so the options will be an array list of text views, which are my 4 text views that I can select from, right? In this case, this text view 1, text view 2, text view 3, text view 4, or text view option 1 to option 2, option 3, option 4. So let's use option 1 here and add that. Now, because option 1 is a nullable, I need to use this let statement. And I can now add this option to the options. So this TV, this text view, which is what we need here for our options array list, I can now add it. And at the index 0, I'm going to add it. And it is the actual text view. So this TV option 1. That's the lambda expression that we are using when we are using let, okay? And now we need to do the same thing with the other options as well. So here, option 2, like so, and it will be at index 1, and then option 3 and option 4 accordingly. So let me add those. Option 3, question mark dot let with option add at index 2 with it, and then the same with option 4. And now what I want to do with all of those options is I'm going to go through them with a for loop. So I'm going to go through each option inside of options, and I'm going to set the color of this particular option, which means of this text view. So set text color, and here I'm going to use a parse. Well, I can use a given color that is already created, but I can also use a color that I'm defining here manually. So I'm going to define this color like so. So this will be the color that I'm going to use. And by the way, just to see how this options or default options view method is actually working, let's call it just for this purpose, for the testing purpose, inside of our onCreate method and see how this is actually working. So instead of using this color, let me just use red, which will be FF, and then a bunch of zeros. So RGB, red, green, blue. And let me comment this line out. Let's test this. Let's just see whether all of our options will now have a red text. So start, and you see all of the options now have a red text. So that's basically what I'm doing here. So this default options view is just going to reset all of those options that we have and we can select from. Okay, so that's really the purpose of what I'm doing here. And here I'm setting the text color, but I'm also going to set the typeface. So I'm going to set the typeface to be default again. And because I want to change it once it's selected. So here, typeface is another property of the option, and I'm going to use the typeface default setting. Then I will choose a background for it. So the background for this button, so for this text view, it's not a button really, but it's a text view, should be gotten from our context compat. And this is something that is some feature that we haven't used yet before, I believe. So where we get a drawable from the context compat, and the drawable that I want to use, well, first of all, I need to pass in the context, and then I can say where the file is that I want to use. And I want to use the default options border BG. Okay, so this is going to be the R drawable. So R stands for resources, then drawable is the folder, and then it's this default options border BG. And by the way, just so we can test it with this other R dot drawable dot, and we called it, I think, selected. Yeah, selected options border. So let's just run the code real quick with this selected options border, and you will see that now all of our selections have this, or text views have this grayed out border surrounding them. Okay, so that's what we're basically doing here. We're setting it back to its default. The thing is, if we run it now, we won't see the difference because we're just basically setting it to what it was by default anyways. But what I want to do is I want to call this method each time that we have selected another option. I want to first set everything back and then set up the new color for the selected option. Okay, so therefore, what we will need to have is, of course, going to be a method that will allow us to display the selected option. So fun selected option view, and here we will need a text view. So we need to know which text view we need to change, and then we need to know which option it was. So which option number, selected option num, which will be of type integer. So once we have selected an option view, so we selected one of those buttons, we clicked on them basically. I first want to call this default options view method, which will set every single button to its normal state. And I'm going to set our global variable, which stores which option we have selected, so mSelected option position, to the selected option num, which is going to be the variable that will be passed to this function that we have created here. And then I'm going to set the text view, well, it's color, so set text color, and I'm going to use a purple color. So here, set text color to be this color parse color with this number, the color string that I'm using. You can just copy that if you want to use the same. And the typeface, so set typeface, I want to set the text view typeface to be bold. So typeface bold, which will just make the selected option be bold. Okay, so if we move over to the final solution, you can see here the selected option is bold, and that is what I'm achieving with this line here. And that is also why we had to add this option typeface default here as well in our default options view method. Okay, otherwise it would just stay bold after we have clicked on it, and everything would be bold at one point. Super bold text views. And then of course I also need to set the background property, and here we can just copy this code here basically. So, and we get rid of this part. So context compat get drawable, and here we use the selected option border background that we had created. So this purple border background. And now we of course just need to add the onClick event for every single option that we have here. So here in the onClick event, by the way, let me change that to view. I'm not happy with the name P0 that was given to me by default. So I'm going to say when the view that was clicked on, and we are really talking about views, we're not talking about buttons, even though buttons are views also, but our views are our text views. So when we're using the when clause here, when the r.id was TV option 1, so when we clicked on option 1, I want to call this method that we just created, so this selected option view, with our text view as the view that we're passing. So unfortunately, TV option 1 is a nullable, so we need to add this .let here. So it's a nullable $.let, and then we can do the select option view with it and the selected option number being 1. So what's happening here? Well, we're calling this selected option view method that we just created, which will, as I said earlier, highlight the selected option. So it will change its appearance, but at the same time, it's also going to change the selected option number. So mSelected option position. And that's really important because we need to know if we've selected the correct option or not. So that's what we do. And you see we are passing it, which is the TV option 1 text view. So here it text view, this grayed out stuff here that you can see here, it : text view. So we are passing a text view, which is exactly what the selected option view requires because we want to then change that text view accordingly. And now we just need to do the same thing with option 2 and so forth. So TV underscore option 2, and here TV option 2, and the rest stays pretty much the same, except for the selected option now of course needs to be 2 as well. And now we need to do the same thing with the other options that we have here. So TV option 3 as well as TV option 4, and be careful with the selected option number. So when you're copy and pasting, always make sure that you are changing every single property correctly, or every single piece of code correctly. Otherwise you will be confused when suddenly your code doesn't work properly. Okay, and now in order to make this run, we need to add on-click listeners to all of our options that we want to be clickable. So the text views that we want to be clickable. So here we can just go ahead and say TV option 1 should have an on-click listener. Set on-click listener. And we saw this set on-click listener before, where we would implement it manually like this, right? For every single listener. But if we were to do that, then we would create a bunch of code inside of our onCreate, which is really not what we should do, because otherwise the onCreate method itself would be hundreds of lines, and we don't want that. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to pass this as the on-click listener. So because TV option 1 is a nullable, I need to add the question mark here. Okay, so now we need to do the same thing with the other text view options, text view option 2, 3, and 4. And what I'm doing here is I'm just saying that this, which means the class questions or quiz questions activity, should be the onClick listener. And you see it is an onClick listener. So we are passing it as onClick listener, and then we're executing this onClick method that we have defined here, or which is an override method. So here we're then saying what should happen once every single item is selected. Okay, so we are basically exporting the onClick, what should happen once we click on it, by setting the onClick listener here, by making sure we have this view onClick listener here, and by implementing the onClick method with the different options where we say what should happen once we select either of those. Now, this by itself is good and all, but let's also add the submit button to it, because the submit button doesn't have an onClick listener, and this is actually going to be the most important one, right? So here, let me pass this here as well, and get rid of this empty space. Now, of course, we also need to have the onClick event for the button. So what should happen with the submit button once we click on it? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up here, button submit, but I'm not going to do anything here. To do implement button submit, because this would be a way too long video if I do it now. It's a really long code that we need to do here, but at least we have prepared it. So now let's run this and see if we can actually select any given button. You can see now we can select the text views and we are resetting them as well. Now, of course, the submit button doesn't do anything, but that's because we haven't implemented it yet. So you see there's a lot going on here. We needed to set up a lot of code, but now you know how to modify your UI items, in this particular case, the text views, in your code directly, interactively. All right, so that's it for this video. See you in the next one.